So firstly, panelists, thank you very much for being with us. I'm going to ask each of you to give a quick reaction to what Robin said. I guess the question is, do you agree with Robin's views? Do you think that the collaborative economy is here to stay? And is everything she said what you see too? And Patrick, let's begin with some remarks from you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. Well, thanks for the shout out for WeWork. I appreciate that. Although there is one slight change. So then that was, yeah. Well, that was 2016. That was 110 locations. Today we have 260 locations open worldwide, which is very exciting. We're opening about 15 to 20 new locations a month around the world. I think what that really speaks to, that growth, and well, we're full, which is great. And I think the reason for that is there's been a pretty fundamental shift in I would say the internet has disrupted every single supply chain that's ever existed. And I think the repercussion of that on the labor market is that a lot of smaller businesses can now collaborate because they don't have the geographical requirement to be in the same place, and major global corporations don't strive on success for privacy and keeping information together. So I think that smaller, more nimble company is really facilitating a lot of this interaction between, not just within businesses, but across businesses. And I think that inevitably gives a comfort and a trust leading to more shared economy. So inevitably it's here to stay.
Great, Patrick, thank you very much indeed. Stephan, what's your reaction to what Robin said? Is the collaborative economy alive and well where you are?
Not really. I'm really fascinated by what you say. I really feel like a dinosaur. Like most people in this room, I guess, we still own things. We have tenants in place with long leases, exclusive leases. They use the space exclusively. They don't want to share with anybody. They want to be secretive and don't want to control who's entering and who's not. And so it's a different world. But there are many aspects that have to change. For instance, we own 2.5 million square meters of space, office, warehouse, production. And we have alone 50,000 car parks on our premises. If we get rid of those car parks, we can build 1 million square meters of new space if we don't use our proprietary cars, if we share the cars. So there are lots of impulses that we can use from collaborative economy for our own business. It hasn't started yet, but it will start. And we as a tenant, landlord, and the different roles in the property world, they will change. I'm pretty certain. We don't know how to do it. We don't know where innovation comes from, but it will change. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephan. Just before we come on to Tamara, let's take a quick vote in the room. So Stephan said he felt a bit like a dinosaur. So let's check. So you can either be in this conversation, you're a digital native, you've always used digital technology, you're a digital migrant, you didn't, but you've come to it, or you're a digital dinosaur, you're still kind of grappling with it. So hands up the digital natives. Okay, thank you very much. Hands up the digital migrants. Okay, and hands up the digital dinosaurs. Okay, congratulations to all of you. Great that you're here. I don't know how you registered for the conference. Must have been very difficult, but great to have you here. Majority of the people in the room were digital migrants, I would say. About 60%, maybe 25% were digital natives, and a good solid core of about 10% were digital dinosaurs. Tamara, how does this look to you? You listened to what Robin was saying. Do you think the collaborative economy is here to stay?
I do think the collaborative economy is here to stay. I don't think that the collaborative economy is the only economy and that it dominates the economy. What I find very interesting in Robin's remarks and where I think the real challenge is in the future for the sharing economy is that there's this fundamental aspect of the sharing economy, which is what we used to call bulk breaking in business classes. Right? So we take a big asset and then we slice it into little pieces, and for that service of slicing it into little pieces, we take a big margin. Right? That is co-working without the peer zinc, without the platform. That is just bulk breaking. what becomes interesting, and especially as we now see more and more co-working offers coming on, is the differentiation. And I think that the differentiation comes from Peers Inc. and from the platform. But that is an art and not a science. I can tell you that, you know, if I stuff 4 times the amount of people inside the same square meters at the same price, I'm going to make 4 times the amount of rent. That's easy math, right? I don't know how to make this amazing recipe where people feel part of a community, and so much part of a community that they want to build it and collaborate, and that's where they want to be. That's where the real value comes from.
Great. Tamara, thank you very much. Ryan, what's your reflections? Do you agree with what Robin said? Do you think the collaborative economy is here to stay?
I definitely do, although I think for commercial real estate, we still are trying to figure out what it means for our industry. I think WeWork is probably the first great example of helping us start to see, you know, what could happen around the collaborative economy. I think people are trying to adjust to the notion of being agile. And really the shift that I think will force everybody to start to understand what it means for our industry is commercial real estate going from a property-focused industry to a user experience-focused industry. And we'll start to use technology. So a lot of the PropTech companies will start to help landlords understand how they adjust to that. So I think it's here to stay, although it's very early innings for commercial real estate.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Now, Robin, you've heard what people have said. How do you react to the comments?
Just making me want to pull out a few more points, that one of the beauties of the Peers Inc. is that it can do that hyper-localization and that hyper-specialty piece that helps you distinguish it from the other standardized norms. And I think that's the beauty of this diversity of offering that's possible. And I also want to point out that the 2 biggest wins I've been careful to use the word collaborative economy versus sharing economy, just because when people are thinking of sharing economy, they're very focused on fixed assets between peers. And I want you to be thinking about keystrokes, data, networks, time, and experience. But the 2 biggest successes in the sharing economy of physical assets has been housing and cars, the 2 most expensive assets we have. And so their idleness was incredibly costly to us. When we've tried to do stuff sharing, it has not been very successful because the transaction costs and me going to pick it up, or just me making the keystroke to make the entry that is available, has been very challenging. So when you think of these, when you think of yourselves, one is leverage the individuality and the uniqueness and the diversity of offering it can bring you, and go for those highest capital assets first, if you're thinking of just physical resources.
I think one of the key things that sort of underlines the consistent points that are being made is an understanding that instead of thinking about real estate, we're landlords, we own buildings, it's starting to think about what the actual user wants. You know, I think that's why Zipcar has been so tremendously successful, something like Uber, you know, Airbnb. It's really tapping into what the user wants. And I think the consistent requirement of the user is options. They don't, if you have a car, you're somewhat lumbered with a car, and there's a lot that goes with that, and you're fixed into it. If you want to use a Zipcar, you get the use and the benefit of a car, and you have the option to not have to deal with a car. So I think it's not just the conveniences. I think it's all of these things providing greater optionality, and to Robin's point, heavier, more expensive assets lock you more, is more complicated. You're locked into those assets, and you have less options. But I think all of this, flexibility, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff with community and energy, but I think at the core consistency of what we're saying is that users want to have some sense of flexibility. And that sort of speaks against the traditional commercial real estate model, which is more akin to a fixed income, long-term, fixed leases, and sort of a coupon almost.
Yes, a shift from an asset to a service economy, and the movement into something that's more customized. Robin, you're nodding, so I'm not going to ask you to comment again. What I want to do now is just ask our panelists to tell us a little bit more about their businesses and what they're up to, and see how technology is driving change in different bits of real estate. And We're going to begin with you, Patrick, and I'm going to ask you to give us a kind of update on where WeWork is, and particularly what your journey is in Europe, and how far you've come and what's coming next. And then, Stephan, I'm going to ask you to pick up on the kind of industrial and logistics side of real estate and tell us about your company and how you're applying technologies. And then we'll move into the sort of the PropTech story a little bit and ask Tamara and Ryan to tell us about theirs. So starting with you, Patrick, where is WeWork on its journey in Europe? Where have you come and where are you going?
Sure. I was watching the presentation before by the gentleman with the great Adidas tracksuit top. Thank you. That was a great presentation. I saw that there was a map of Europe without England in it, which was a little sad and hurtful, but I think very popular and understandable. I still see London as remaining as a phenomenal center globally for innovation. I think as a city, sort of undeniably, it has great potential to attract. I also see that I agree with a lot of it, that I think Berlin is tremendously attractive, Paris is tremendously attractive. What we see on the WeWork model with respect to Europe, excuse me, is the most important thing is to think of the WeWork model. The real estate is a gateway, and it's a gateway into a platform. The purpose of the platform is to facilitate the success of users on that platform. And that means empowering businesses. It means supporting them with a lot of their additional stuff that they have to do to make that business successful, real estate, but also sort of accounts, healthcare, and so on. But ultimately, it's creating a community and a network that has a physical basis, but also has a virtual platform. And obviously, we love that ability to scale exponentially, but really, it's the ability to reach out, and it's not just scale exponentially, it's also a model that becomes more attractive and more powerful the more significant it gets. So I'm particularly proud to see our growth in Europe, because I think right now Europe is, I wouldn't say in a crisis, but I think it's certainly facing some serious challenges. And for me, and I started with WeWork in New York and expanded across America, it's become very apparent that if you work, for example, in Chicago and you want to collaborate with somebody in San Francisco or New York, that's not that difficult. You probably have 2 or 3 degrees of separation and you can reach out. Somebody, I think, who's working, let's say, Madrid, who wants to collaborate with somebody who's in Amsterdam or Munich or Frankfurt, that's a lot more difficult. And I don't think that platform and that ease of reaching out really exists. So with respect to what we're doing in Europe, it's maintaining that growth of that platform. It's facilitating and empowering the success of the users within the platform that we have. And it's having these gateways, which are real estate, on more and more different spots around Europe. So right now, we're in 18 different cities, and by the end of 2019, we'll be in over 32 different cities across Europe. And I include Europe, also the EMEA and Australia, allocated by somebody I don't think who's too familiar with geography, but and very annoying, but separately. But the growth path for Europe is I'm very, very excited about Europe. I'm very excited about being in these sort of key cities, and I believe in real estate very much in sort of key cities across Europe, and Europe has many, many key cities. So I think this platform is viable in many, many cities around the world, and in Europe it's pretty obvious to pick those out. So
and just in case people in the room don't know, Patrick, for the buildings that you're operating, who are the owners?
We have Francois from Allianz, is an owner of ours for a building. Blackstone, Brookfield, Vornado, SL Green, Tishman Speyer. I mean, I think at this point it's pretty rare to come across an owner that I haven't dealt with. But that's also because we hope, and I hope that our landlords attest to this, and I believe they do with the repeat deals that we do. We come in, we have in-house design, we have in-house operations for facilities, for the community staff. We build very beautiful space. And we also make sure that it's not just chopping it up into 4 times. The secret sauce is making sure that the community, the energy, the atmosphere that exists in that space is very positive. It has a lot of options. It allows people to be collaborative. It allows people to be private, personal, whatever they would like to do. And that energy that we create, that spills out not just within our space, but spills out within the building and in the surrounding areas. So we've frequently and repeatedly seen examples where retail within a building on a ground floor will increase significantly, and we know that from landlords with revenue splits, But you know, we see that kind of positive energy is contagious.
Great, thank you very much. So we've got the story on WeWork, very, very helpful. Thank you, Patrick. Now, Stephan, you're focusing very successfully in a real estate business that focuses on manufacturing, logistics, advanced industrial spaces. Tell us a little bit about your business model and how is technology changing the way your business works?
Yeah, happy to. First of all, I think it's very important to understand that real estate is not a problem for most companies. Other than you said, if you talk to the CFO of a large German company, he doesn't know anything about real estate, and he just doesn't care because it's below 5% of the cost on his balance sheet. If he produces something, if it's a service company, then it's more. But for most tenants that we work with, real estate is not an issue. It's an enabler for their production and storage processes and what they do. I'm right with you. We should focus on the tenant's needs. And the tenant's needs that we see in the future is to be more flexible with the space, to change the kind of use. And we see this a lot. We have almost all industries in Germany in our house. We see the printing and the media companies, they're going down, they're losing space. We have 3D printing companies that take over that kind of space. What they all need is more flexibility, and we have to evolve to be a service provider. That being said, we're focused around equity and debt and long-term, and we have to work on being more short-term and being able to offer ourselves and what we do as a service to them and make money not only on the square meters that we rent out, but on enabling workplaces. That's what we think the future is going to be.
Okay, so the change in your business model is not the nature of the real estate that you're owning and operating, it's the services you provide to your tenants and how you calibrate and charge for that.
Plus the ability to change the uses, the building environment, the way the companies do things. Today, increasingly, you cannot differentiate between the different uses of administration, storage, or production. It all looks the same. People work in the same kind of environment and change the uses all the time. So this is coming together, and somebody, the landlord, the asset manager, they have to take care of this changing surrounding. Yeah.
Thank you. Tamara, so tell us a little bit more about WiredScore, and tell us in particular how you think this fits into the broader PropTech revolution and where you place yourselves in that.
Sure. So WiredScore is the most pragmatic PropTech company. WiredScore certifies commercial office buildings for varying degrees of internet connectivity. This product, this idea, was born of the realization that the buildings that we live in, the buildings that we work in, rather, but also that we live in, are no longer able to keep up with the ways that we work. And that, ironically, we talk about the internet economy and startups, and the leading companies in the world now are more and more technology companies, but most of us work in buildings where we have regular internet failures and where it's really hard to make phone calls sometimes. And so, born of this realization, we created a product where we actually audit office buildings. We go through a pretty technical scorecard with lots of criteria, and then we highlight areas where the building has connectivity failures or potential failures. We make some recommendations, and then we'll come back and do a second audit to then certify the building. This certification allows landlords to prove to tenants that they are going to move into buildings where the rest of the PropTech revolution will be possible. They'll actually be able to have a smart building, have all of the services that we're now talking about as the present and the future of real estate. And more than that, it allows investors and asset managers to ward off obsolescence for their assets and have a proof of quality for what is now one of the most important assets in real estate.
So it's your primary client group, the landlords, who want to use you as an insurance mechanism or assurance to prove to tenants that actually they will guarantee the kind of connectivity they need.
Yes, on the technical side, it's an insurance, and on the marketing, commercial leasing side, it's branding, it's marketing, it's leasing. And more, we now have tenants who demand to be in WiredScore buildings. And so while the landlords and the developers are the ones that we actually sell to, it's the tenants who are demanding this quality.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. By the way, in a few minutes, we're going to open it up for questions and discussion. So send me questions on the app if you wish to. I've already got 2 or 3. Be ready to put your hands up. Ryan, tell us, if you will, now about VTS and about how VTS fits into, again, this PropTech revolution, where you see your niche being, and how is your business model evolving?
Sure. So for anyone that's not familiar with VTS, we're the leading leasing and asset management platform in the world. And our company's mission is really to be the driving force behind moving the industry from a pen and paper to a digital-first industry. And we believe that this is really the first time in the history of commercial real estate where this has become a reality. And if you look at the traction on just our platform alone, we have about 7 billion square feet being managed live every day by the top institutional owners and brokers in the world. And just to frame the high-level problem we're solving, I mean, prior to VTS, and so really what might be reality for a lot of people in this room today is when you think about the way you run your portfolio, your world is very disconnected. You have lots of information being stored in siloed spreadsheets that aren't very connected. You have a lot of antiquated technologies that don't talk to one another, and a process around reporting that is highly intensive, even just to gather some general portfolio information. So holistically, we think that is driving a number of problems within the industry. So step one, our mission was to help our clients really create a better process and bring that all into one platform where they can start to leverage real-time information really to make better leasing decisions and asset management decisions. And the product has evolved a lot over the last couple of years, and really where our customers are now pushing us is to help us really start to think about how their portfolios are actually benchmarking versus their peers in the marketplace, creating new products to really help understand how they should be investing in their assets to deliver a better customer experience. And so the operating pressures of the institutional capital that have really dominated the market over the last 5 years have been a driving force in a number of the products that we've been creating. So there's been a heavy focus on how do we create efficiency around reporting, and how are we going to really drive revenue in what has become a much more competitive marketplace.
And what are the data platforms that, in a sense, you're integrating to do this? Is it data that's already available, or are you bringing some new data to the story?
It's a mix. So, a big part of what we do is actually connecting information from the existing platforms within an organization. So it could be, mainly it's the ERP systems, so the ERDs, the MRIs, the SAPs, the budgeting and forecasting systems, so in Argus, and then marrying that with all of the real-time data that's being pumped in from really the brokerage community. So as an owner, if I have a portfolio of 10 different buildings in a market, I could have 10 different brokers reporting into me within that market. And again, replacing the old way of reporting through Excel, now all that information is being pumped in real time and aggregated in a way where we're actually presenting actionable insights that are helping people to better position buildings and spaces. So that's where the data starts to create a competitive advantage.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so floor's open now for questions. I've got a few come through on the app, but I want to see if people in the room want to put their hands up. Anybody waiting to ask a question? And let's get the microphones down here if we may. Okay, anybody waiting? Okay, while you're thinking about it, we've got 5 or 6 questions here, and some of them, Patrick, are quite challenging. So let's start with, so there's one here that basically says, how difficult is it for WeWork to convince landlords that you're the right tenants, given the current competition for especially bigger spaces in the core centers in cities like Germany? So how do you convince landlords you're the right people?
Sure. I think I always find it interesting to ask, if it's all right, who people could show hands, who's actually been inside of a WeWork? That's great.
And who hasn't? Let's just see who hasn't. Okay, so that was about 75-25.
Well, listen, you're all very invited to come and come into a WeWork. And we have free beer, if that makes a difference. I think that's a large part of it. I mean, all the landlords that we talk to, our CEO would very happily say that what we're really selling is energy. And in America, that goes down a little bit more smoothly. In Europe, that's deemed to be pretty cheesy. But and it is. But I think there's a lot of truth to it. And I think as people come into the space, you start to understand that in principle, in concept, you divide things out, you have higher density. The truth is none of that works unless you have people really using the collaborative spaces, because otherwise they do have a very uncomfortable density. But there's two things that happen if people start using the collaborative areas with higher density. The first is that their actual personal usage of space really increases. And I'm still just talking about space, but their personal use of space increases. But also I equate it to why New York City, Manhattan, and Hong Kong are very exciting cities. And it's because for the same amount of pavement or sidewalk space that you just have more stories and more people. And if that's done in a positive way, that's a very positive thing. If it's done in a bad way, it doesn't work, and it feels too intense. I think that's the first thing. So it's the actual physical, tangible piece and the energy. And then the second piece is really that as landlords continue to understand what the model is, and the fact that we have this platform, we're vertically integrated, if the market is learning this quickly, we're learning that quickly because of the way that we're internally set up. The more that landlords dig, the more innovation that they see, the more that we're looking towards the future. And respectfully, I very much disagree with the comment that tenants don't care about real estate. I think if that's the case, they're going to be, in 5 years or maybe even less, really struggling to attract and retain top quality people. And again, taking this back to the user, I think people are starting to realize that the current commercial real estate solution is probably not moving as quickly as it ought to.
Thank you very much. Robin, there's a question basically for you that says, isn't the word collaborative in collaborative economy a bit misleading? After all, these businesses are owned by a very small number of people who've made huge wealth for them. To what extent is the collaborative economy actually going to result in a better sharing of wealth?
There's two parts to that question. If we talk about, let's go to Airbnb as an example. So the Airbnb founders and the investors, when this company goes public, will get really rich after how many years? 8 or 9 years. But on day one, year one, the person who rented out their house to someone for a night made money. Day 2, the person who rented out their house made money. Day 5, every single time a host rented out the house, someone made money. Whereas the amount of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that went into the platform before it broke even, and the risk of this, I think there's a real underappreciation for the risk-reward piece. So but I want to say that I think the Airbnb founders and investors are likely taking too much of that value, but I completely disagree with the fact that the individual participants in the collaborative economy are not at each and every transaction having value given. Otherwise, they wouldn't participate. But there is a whole separate piece around what it does to the workforce who are working in collaborative economy, in the sharing economy pieces, because we have designed our entire tax structure, finance structure, government, social safety nets, benefits around the expectation that you are working full-time employment with one employer. And there's a sentence that I got from someone else that I love to repeat. My father had 1 job in his lifetime. I'll have 6 in my lifetime, and my children will have 6 at the same time. We have moved to a totally different way of work, yet our social safety nets and workplace rules have been structured around this old-fashioned path. So profoundly true that workers on these platforms, depending on which country you're at, my country worst of all, where we don't have any social safety nets or benefits, but differentially if you're living in a place that has healthcare. So, but in either places, the tax structures and all these things don't work. So it is definitely an issue, but let me just add one more sentence. When capitalism started, Children also worked 7-day weeks around the clock, and there were issues, and we corrected them. The sharing economy is not perfect today. It has a huge amount of opportunities and benefits, one of which is flexibility of work. And there are problems that we need to correct.
I gotta give a plug. Anyone is from the US, WeWork gives heavily discounted healthcare benefits.
Very
for
good.
all of our members.
Just before we go on, we've got lots of questions coming in now, but I want to see if anyone in the room is waiting to ask a question out loud. There's a gentleman over at the back, so if you get the microphone, keep the hand up. The microphone comes best that way. Anybody else waiting here? We're only going to have one chance at this because we're running out of time quick. Let's keep our answers really nice and crisp now, and we'll try to get through 10 questions or so.
There seems to be this idea that if you collaborate on a platform, you're sharing ideas, you're transparent, people get better information, and that means people will make better decisions. I'd like to make the observation people don't react rationally like that. The information about health, for example, we talked about, the rising levels of obesity in the Western world are quite incredible. Still high levels of smoking, and yet nobody could claim they're not informed about this. It's not as if it's not out there. So it doesn't automatically lead to the fact that people will do the right thing and will make better decisions by following this approach.
Or I guess the question is there something more than information that's being provided, which we might come back to. Let's just see, anybody else waiting? No, okay, well, there's an important point, and I guess, Robin, you're going to pick up on that in a minute. Let's just do a question for you, Ryan. These are all quick questions now. PropTech apps like VTS help landlords better understand what tenants want and therefore able to offer WeWork-type experiences. Does VTS help landlords do that?
Well, in an indirect way. I mean, we're giving landlords information around again, what their prospects want. I think one of the best examples that you gave was around Duolingo and somebody focusing on why somebody failed the test. I mean, we think that one of the most overlooked pieces of information is why people actually don't convert in an asset. And one of the most powerful reports that we have is something that's called a dead deal analysis, and showing you statistically why somebody is actually not coming to your building. And something like that is actually driving landlords to help think about how they reinvest in a building to better cater to the prospects in the market. And so that could be very correlated with how they think about a WeWork type facility.
Thank you very much. Stephan, there's a question for you. Will the co-working approach that's been so successful in the office market actually operate in the industrial and the logistics market going forward? Will you be operating shared spaces?
I guess so, yeah. One of our best tenants we have is in Munich. They're producing 3D printers, more than 1,000 units a year. And what they do is they say, tomorrow the production process will be fully integrated with sensors and with 3D printers and robots. And it doesn't make sense that just one company uses the whole production line. So they're going to share. And what we now see is that increasingly, even competitors, they work together on different fields. They even do research together. So we will see not only co-working, but also co-producing. Or co-storage. That's a very easy catch. I mean, who needs storage exclusively? So we'll have this process going on. Right now, it's just starting. We don't see this as a tenant demand. We don't sign leases with two companies for one space, but we see subletting of spaces with competitors even. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Tamara, there's a question here that says, what's the best way to improve the digital connectivity in an area that's poorly served by fiber cables, etc.?
So there are some technologies that can help in this instance. We see a lot of point-to-point technologies. So a building that is well served can actually beam its service to another building that's about a mile away. There are satellite systems, and there are the mobile networks. I think the mobile networks are particularly important because they are the biggest connectivity problem, I would say, today in buildings, because we build buildings so well for thermal insulation that we insulate ourselves really well from mobile signal. But you can fix that problem, and it's a very good idea if you have limited fiber options.
Great, and there's a question here that says, do you share your data, your intelligence about buildings and districts with public authorities so that they understand where the connectivity challenges are?
So in a very specific anonymized way we do. Something that we haven't talked that much about yet, but I think we really should talk about on a PropTech panel is data sharing. A lot of the most interesting businesses in technology and in PropTech today use a lot of data, a lot of personal data. Maybe some of you are familiar with the new legislation coming in to Europe, GDPR this year. That data has a value, and individuals are starting to know what people are doing with their data, what businesses are doing with their data, to recognize that value, and are now going to trade on it.
Great. Patrick, I'm going to give you 4 questions at once, because there's a lot of questions coming on the WeWork model. So the first one is, would you ever get involved in white label space management where your brand is not the brand that's visible? Do you ever do that? Will you start to own and operate your own buildings? How will you avoid the fate of Regis? And you know, there's a question here about, you know, the profitability of what you provide, especially as some people in the room perceive that your entry-level approach is often to take buildings free of charge. So, are you making super profits? Is really the question.
Sure. So the answer, I'll keep them quick. I'll try. So the first answer is yes. I'll expand on that, but it's yes. We've got 2 real products. The first is called Powered by We. It's working with lots of tenants in the market to say, you have a desire for real estate, that's what we're focusing on. If you think of a building as hardware, think of WeWork as the software that sits between the building and the user. So we can do everything for capacity, sourcing the buildings, actually doing the design, operating the space, layering it with our virtual platform. All of this can be catered for different companies. So we are definitely, you know, we've built WeWorks, brought people in. We're now starting to take all of that technology and expand it out. The analogy we use is Amazon used to sell books. Amazon still sells books. And then the second one is WeOS, which is the We operating system. Again, that's layering just the platform technology that allows a company to communicate and basically improve productivity of the space and of the users of that space. So that's the first one. The second one is, will we buy? Yes. WeWork OpCo will continue to operate as an OpCo. Real estate is an entry point, a platform. We love campuses. We love self-contained buildings. We love floors in buildings. There's a huge variety of different ways that we can bring the we world and collective energy.
There's a question here about whether you're going to establish We Love.
We already have a lot of We Love.
Okay.
I have a lot of We Love.
Good.
We actually have had a lot of marriages out of our communities. But, that's love. So we are going to buy buildings. We did raise some money separately on the PropCo. We've also JV'd with a lot of different partners, and but the real estate is an entry point. We're happy to address it in multiple ways. And I can't remember more than 2 things. You've got to help me out.
Okay, so then there was one about whether you're making super profits, and how will you avoid the demise of Regis?
Sure. So the super profits, we are on each building that we have a very profitable business. If anybody wants to sign an NDA, I'm very happy to share all that information. But we are a private company. Our investors ask us to hold that tight. And I'm talking about a stabilized EBITDA margin after any concession given by a landlord has burned off. So the run rate revenue and EBITDA of WeWork is very, very healthy. I think our existing landlords can attest, and I'm happy to share that with anybody. And then will we avoid the fate of Regis? I mean, again, I would probably ask the question, who has been inside of a WeWork? We are fortunate, I think, that Regis has made some terrible mistakes. I've said an answer to this question before with Mark Dixon in the room. I'm a little upset. But they've made some, I think, terrible mistakes in how they treated landlords, how they behaved in downturns and didn't really treat landlords as partners. I think currently they were the market leader. They had a phenomenal M&A team. But they didn't have great margins, they didn't have great space efficiencies, And what we maybe call our secret sauce, which is the community space and the amenity, that was never really used. And so it was a slightly archaic model, but they had very clever M&A and, sort of sourced up the market.
Great, thank you so much. That was 4 questions all at once. You did brilliantly. I'm going to come to you, Robin, with 2 final questions, but just to put to Ryan, to Stephan, and to Tamara, if you want. There's a question here about cryptocurrencies. Do you think that they're going to change the game in all of this? And there's another question about who's going to disrupt the disruptors? What's the next generation of disruption that you're going to face? Any of you want to comment on those ones? Ryan?
I know nothing about cryptocurrencies.
No?
So
Good.
I'm not the best person to answer that. But who will disrupt the disruptors? I don't know. I think that the early sort of crop of PropTech companies that have been able to break out of the pack still have a lot of work to do. So I don't see anybody on the horizon that's going to disrupt the current so-called disruptors.
Okay, Stephan?
Well, we have a team of 5 people who do digital solutions for us that try to invent things and streamline processes. And for instance, we had one project that we want to automatically lease parking spaces with no human interaction using blockchain technology, and it's a total failure. We don't know how to do it really. We don't get our hands around the blockchain technology, it's too complicated and it doesn't work. So we will apply a traditional sort of shopping system to do this. And Berlin is the startup place for PropTechs in Germany. We have more than 100 new PropTech startups here. We look at them 2 interviews a week, and we haven't found the disruptive idea. Most of the startups, they work on very small problems, and they're not fixing our solutions. They don't provide access. So we haven't seen it yet, but we are looking.
Right. Great.
Maybe we'll find one day.
Well, we wish you luck. Tamara?
So I agree with you that most PropTech companies are working on relatively small solutions, and I also agree with Patrick's idea that the building is analogous to a computer. It's the hardware, and that we are waiting for an operating system that sits on top of it and that would actually integrate all of these, I think, what could be very useful PropTech technologies into a platform that could then be deployed across buildings. To my knowledge, most of the services that come out of WeWork, for example, are actually analog and are not yet tech services. And I think that the disruptor, or maybe it will be WeWork, or maybe it will be WiredScore, who knows, but will be the company that can actually produce a platform that we can deploy across buildings, whether they're multi-tenant, single-tenant, co-working, industrial headquarters.
Maybe together.
Maybe together, yeah.
Great. Robin, there are 2 questions for you to end on. So one is really...
I was going to answer a different question.
Oh, were you? Well, answer that now. What's that?
Okay. If I think what is the biggest disruptor to this, it's going to be self-driving cars that are going to transform the world more than anything else has and will kill your sector unless you get on it. So I'll just send you to a Heaven and Hell video that I had done. Exactly. So it's what you really have to be looking out for, and so think hard about that. And I've been talking to lots of ULI leadership about how you can get on that. But that is going to be the big disruptor in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's funny, because that is an answer to the question I was about to ask you. So that's very clever, isn't it? So
Mind meld.
So the second question then is, if you were starting a new company today, given what you said about your commitment to the planet and its future, what's the company that you need to lead next to really have an impact there?
The company that I'm going to be leading next is likely going to be an NGO that is coordinating all the efforts of cities around the world to make sure that we go through this tumultuous mobility transformation and make sure that when all the lava cools, that we end up with sustainable and livable cities where we have really transformed from personal car ownership to shared transport, reclaimed the 30 to 60% of cities that go to parked cars, and completely transformed cities. So that's the next gig.
Wonderful. Now, in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Jürgen Fenk, who's going to moderate the next panel. We've been talking on this panel about the new collaborative economy, about PropTech, technology challenges for the real estate industry. I want you to join me in thanking Robin Chase, Patrick Nelson, Stephan Bone-Winkel, Tamara Brisk, and Ryan Masiello. Thank you very much.